Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are on page 1224. Closer to the bottom of 1224. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com if you want to follow the text. Okay. So middle of level 2 in emotional maturity, maturation and development and the growth of associated with every child and every human being. And the level called murgish. Mutveh is the hardwiring of the natural emotional characteristics, essentially the genetic structure, the genetic code that is concealed. Murgish is when it begins to appear, you start seeing some personality, some of the emotional expression. And of course, this goes through stages as it grows. Seichel plays a key role because Seichel guides and allows for the child to be aware, which in turn awakens and stimulates an emotion. Yesterday, I asked the question, is it the central nervous system part of the mind, or is it also the actual cognitive process? It clearly here is talking the cognitive process because he uses the words hakara, different expressions that he uses. It's clearly, like he says, when he says that a child, I want to quote one line that was very, very clear. He says, you see somewhat of hakara sichlis, some cognitive awareness, some cognitive recognition. However, he broke the murgish into two parts, to two stages, Yemei Yanika and Achrei Yemei Yanika. Yemei Yanika is during what's called the nursing period, which we saying for the first 24 months, 2 years. I didn't check it up, but I'm going with what Rabbi Shlomo said, 2 years. There's already more than Mutveh. There's some form of recognition, like he says, and therefore some emotional reactions. That means murgish midas hem bizgalus. And there it's ktsas seichel. That's the word he used, ktsas. So before murgish, the level of mutveh, he called like chaymer. Well, we'll talk about the chaymer in a minute. So he said, mutveh levad shein is ein amidas nikarim klal, ein bam gilia seichel klal. But then comes the stage that he called that the chaymer sheberuchnius, that the chaymer of the midas, of the raw midas, are becoming ready and primed to receive the surah which comes from seichel. Only the body, only the chaymer. And but the ikar is urak mitzad hadva. So it's still revealing the natural raw midas that were concealed before, and that's achon of the Kabbalah Sudas HaSeichel. And he says clearly, midas is generally chaymer, the raw, crass part, and seichel is surah. So that's the murgish shebe midas. So achon of the Kabbalah Sudas HaSeichel shezel la'achra yanika. One second. Yeah. So you have two stages. One, the emotions are becoming revealed, and there's ktsas seichel. There's a little amount of cognitive element in that. It's the end of the parentheses I'm reading. Yeah. And then there's the murgish mishu achon the kabbalah says achra yanika who begins murgish mitzad seichel. So after the yanika, after the nursing period, comes another stage where seichel is continuing to grow, and therefore the midas accordingly are also being affected by that. So that was the parentheses. To break it down into these two parts, these two stages, and with a little more detail of how exactly it works. And after the parentheses, which I'm continuing right now, the inyan hamurgish, 3 lines from the bottom of 1224. The inyan hamurgish bezeh. Now we're talking already achrei yemei yanika. The midas are now following according to the cognitive recognition. That the child recognizes that he should recognize with his mind that this is appropriate to want and desire. And this can be whether we mentioned the memory of the taste of food, or it could be seeing an object, or it could be anything that the child is recognizing with the mind that it's the Ratzon should be kach v'kach, and as the midas are being governed by that. Now, when I say governed, it doesn't mean the mind controls the midas, but it's guiding them. That's the point here. And he brings a proof now in halacha. Ulechein hapuutes mekcha mekach. Puutes means the small ones. The question in halacha is, if a child either signs or in some way agrees to some business arrangement or agreement. So you could say it's a child, they don't know anything better. No, but halacha says, that even if it's a child, you have to take in consideration a business transaction they may have made. Obviously, we're not talking about a 1-year-old here. We're talking about a child that's capable of doing that. But what do you see from that? That even though the seichel is not fully developed, but to say that there's no recognition and no intelligence at all, also not. And he says exactly what age that is, which is the pu'utas, hein tenekis. These are young children, bnei vav shanim, 6 years old. Sha'oz hein v'lav shalahen wal pi hakadosh ha'seichel. So when they say yes or no, in other words, when they say yes or no, it's not just completely emotional impulse. It's according to their page 1225, hakadosh ha'seichel. There's some type of recognition. The hein shalahen hein. And when they say yes, it means yes. And when they say no, it means no. Valkein oz mekcha mekach. Therefore, their transactions, their mekach is a transaction, is considered a transaction because there's already recognition. But it's age 6. And this maturity, or this maturation, or growth and development, he b'meshech hazman shemizgad lahaseichel, continues over time. Takes over time that the seichel grows and expands and matures. And that causes the midas also to grow. We already explained what is the growth of the midas. First of all, they're more revealed. Secondly, they're more focused on higher and loftier objectives. And thirdly, they're more refined and not just crass and raw. However, all this is still the seichel of murgish, what we call the seichel of yenika, seichel ha-yenika. It's not seichel, of muskel, of meichin. Remember, Mutveh, murgish, muskel, ibur, yenika, meichin. So, we're still talking about a seichel that relates to and is somewhat commensurate to midas. So we're talking now the stages of development from pregnancy to the early birth, which is very similar to the beginning of the emergence of emotions, all the way till where? Now we already reached age 6 and on. He says, "V'agdola zu," this stage of growth, of maturation, mishtalemes adud gimel shana. It completes, this stage it's completed till 13 years old. Sha'oz hu b'chinas ish. That's when the child becomes level of ish. Of course, for women, it's 12 years old. He becomes what we call an ish. Now you can call him an ish, a man. Dahainu, why? What does it mean? What's that stage? What happens at that age? And of course, it doesn't mean the day a person turns 13. It means that period. Dahainu shleimus hamidas b'agdalos and alidei haseichel. Not shleimus haseichel. The shleimus hamidus, the emotions, have now grown to a point, to the extent that they can grow, that the seichel matures them, all within the realm of midas. So now a gadol someone who turns bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, is responsible for their behavior. Because you can't just say that they're impulsive emotions. You have the ability. So the seichel has refined the emotions to the extent that you can call the person an ish, shleimus hamidus bagdalos na'alidei seichel. So that's stage 2. Mutveh is pregnancy, and what he said was when a child is born. Murgesh begins once the child starts having some recognition, and therefore emotional and commensurate to that emotional expression, like we learned. That continues to grow. That's Yemei Yenika, would be the nursing stage. Let's say till age 3, or to the end of 2 years, age 3, yeah. Upshernish. Then comes 3 till 13. In between, he said 6 was Mekha Mekach, but basically that's like Acher Yemei HaYenika, after the nursing stage, and the midas continue to grow, and they're mature. They come to a point of a certain mature stage at age 13. Now, that doesn't mean that a person at 13 is fully mature emotionally and intellectually. It's still going to be growth, but there's a stage that concludes them, which takes them to the next level where moichin begins to become a far more dominant force, which we didn't learn yet. We will learn. So we've covered Mutveh and Murgish. I'm going to finish till the end of the paragraph, and then I'll stop for any questions. Uberuchni is b'midas the nefesh alikis. Now remember, in the last page, which was the parenthesis, and we discussed it. When you read this on its own, the question is: are we talking about the divine soul or the animal soul? So most likely, it's all talking about the animal soul, nefesh abamis. But in the parentheses in the previous page, he said also the nefesh alikis, not the nefesh alikis as it is in heaven, as the neshama in its pure form. The nefesh alikis, as it develops within a child, within a human being, also goes through a stage, he called it katnus, where the midesev are still tivim. And then he's still drawn to the crassness of the animal soul. That's what we learned in the previous page, and I explained it. He's going back now to nefesh alikis in this parenthesis. So this may help understand it a bit. So he says, "Baruchni is b'midas the nefesh alikis." So what we've talked about till now, Mutveh, Murgish, Ibur, and Yenika, he says when you're talking spiritually, in the emotions of the divine soul, Ad Yud Gimel Shana Hu B'chinas Ibur Adayin. Until 13 is not even Yenika, it's Ibur. So he's clearly making a distinction. When we talked about the natural human being, which means the Nefesh HaTivis, which is most likely what he's talking about, which is somewhat like the Nefesh HaBamis, just a different expression, which is less focused on the behemoth part, but more on the natural biological part. So then by Bar Mitzvah, by 13, you've gone through Mutveh and Murgish, you've gone through Ibur and Yenika, and even post-Yenika, but all still in the stage of Murgish, meaning the second stage of where the midas are the dominant force and they're maturing according to the seichel. He says when it comes to the midas of nefesh alikis, and it's interesting, he says uberuchnius, because he's not speaking here now, Gashmi is the growth of a child, not just the body, but even the emotional growth. He's talking here clearly on a more spiritual level. He says till 13 is the level of Ibur. Says vehelach, which can be an on, ukamoishi is boyer. So this is going to come later. And the growth of the midas through meichin goes from Yud Gimel Shana. Because remember, if you remember, I mentioned from Shulchan Aruch, it says by the bris is tchilas knisas nefesh alikis, nefesh, that by a bris is the beginning of the divine soul's entrance into the child. And Gemar knisa is by bar mitzvah. And really, those first 13 years are controlled mostly by the nefesh habamis, which means that not negative, not evil, but by the natural impulses of the child's spirit. But there is the stages of, like he said, how moichin comes into play, because recognition influences and impacts and guides the emotions. When it comes to nefesh alikis, which means the work of the nefesh alikis, to bring divine into your life, bar mitzvah is really when it begins. The Aveda of the Nefesh Alikis really begins. There is growth before that. That's clear. But the main effect of Moichin on the Midas, he says, Hagdolas HaMidas Ayidei Moichin, is really after from 13 years and older. because there the focus is on divine service. Till now, we were speaking about the natural growth that a child grows from basic raw emotions to more focused emotions, or more refined emotions, or more guided by the seichel. We're not talking about Aveda. We're not talking about bringing the divine into this world. We're just talking about the natural biological growth of every child. But when it comes to Ruchnis and Midas and Nefesh Elikis, he says that Gdolas Hameh till Bar Mitzvah is Ibur, till 13. And the growth of the Midas, Idea Meichin, is from Yud Gimel Shana, because again, he's talking about divine service. And you can't expect from a child to be serving God in that level yet. Yes, you expect them to make brachas, and there's chinuch and education. But the real work of becoming an oved, a real servant, a real serving God in the fullest sense of the word, till 13 is more of a training period, education, not the actual Mutveh v'Esa where he's ready to go out to so-called battle, in the actual work of what the Nefesh Elikis is supposed to accomplish in this world. But he says, "U'kamoishi is boy," as shall be explained. So I'm sure more is going to come on this topic. And then the final two sentences here, the final two lines of this paragraph, "Ubchinas muskol." Now he goes to level 3. I'll just read it because it's short. "Ubchinas muskol, Mutveh murgish muskol," a level of intelligence. Hu hagdolas hameichin atzman. Not just how the meichin are guiding as the emotions mature and develop, but this is the growth of mind itself is matures and develops to become a true, living up to its true potential. Oh, wow. And he says, now we're not just talking about guiding them, but actually changing the midas from the way they were naturally born. We didn't say this till now. This is what Meichin can do. And in general, this maturation period, this growth period, is till 20 years old. That's when Meichin the Godless concludes. And that's why ad esim shana, a child cannot, an heir of his father cannot sell the property of his father until he's age 20. Mekchon mekach, to say yes or no, that's already at age 6. But to actually limche benichse avav, to sell, and for that matter to buy, but probably selling benichse avav, the property of his father, till 20, because 20 is the mature person where you can rely on their business acumen and being able to achieve, to be able to do that type of work. That shall be explained. So he actually gave us years here. He didn't mention when Yanika is, but he definitely mentioned age 6, age 13, and now age 20 is when the muscle comes to maturation, to its full development. This doesn't mean a person doesn't continue to grow after 20, but everything then is in place as far as the physical development of the mind, emotions, the physical body. When a person stops actually growing, I'm not talking about in weight, we're talking about in height and so on. So that is, we conclude this paragraph. So he explained the 3 Mutveh murgish muskel. In the next paragraph, he's going to explain this all in the neshama ha'elikis, which is going to go more like an avodah and more in divine service. But let me pause here, and please, any questions, comments, go ahead. Okay. Okay. So we continue on.
We spoke about it yesterday, about the Nefesh Elikis Atzmon, which you said you will have to look in it more. To me, at least, it's not clear. What does it mean? The Nefesh Elikis Atzmo Ad Yud Gimel Shono Hu Bchinas Ibur Adayin. The Nefesh Elikis, if you're talking about these galus beguf, you understand, but the Nefesh Elikis Atzmo.
I don't understand what you're talking about. You're talking about Nefesh Elikis in heaven? You're talking about the way a child experiences. You could say the same thing with Meichin and Midas before the Nefesh Elikis. In Sharshe and Atzilus, it's all fine. We're talking about in the human development. It says in Shulchan Aruch that by the bris is the beginning of the Knesset, and by the bar mitzvah is the end of the Knesset. We're talking about the Nefesh Elikis as it develops in the human being, We're not talking about the nefesh elikis in its shadish, Yisrael, v'kutra brichu kul echad, or chelik elikah. We're talking about the nefesh elikis's effect. A child, it says agdim et tainise, that the child is controlled by the animal soul, and the nefesh elikis does not really enter until bar mitzvah. We're not talking about the nefesh elikis in its root. We're talking about in its growth within the human being. Ibur yunika meichin.
Good. Thank you.
Everything here is we're talking about that development. We're not talking about a neshama l'mayla. Even a child, even a rebbe before he's bar mitzvah, he's not mechuyev b'mitzvahs. Okay.
But still, the thing that we said yesterday, that the nefesh elikis nimshach achar chumri is the nefesh abamis, this, I think, it's still not so clear.
Well, I explained as best as I could. When I'll find more, I'll be happy to help. But happy to share.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Now that I said, I can read that needs more explanation, because there he's not saying the nefesh is not active. He's actually saying it's being nimshach. I understand it because the fact is the nefesh elikis is already in the child. It's not like outside. So therefore, its midas are still childish midas. It's like like when you have children in a class and the troublemakers do something. Sometimes the good children also follow along because they're still immature, so they can follow along. They don't have that full maturity to make their own decisions. But that's so it's like drawn, like following. But that's so far what I've said. Okay. Any other questions about what we learned till now, or should I continue? Okay, continue. So I reiterate again, it's pretty clear, especially from these parentheses about the divine soul, that he's not talking about avodah so much here, but actually about the actual development of a child, and which can be applied to child psychology in any given form or fashion. It's obviously coming to explain ultimately different stages of emotional development, but the focus is right now was not the avodah of it. It was just sharing the facts of like the map of the development of the human faculties. Just like when he talks about the map of tzimtzum and lifnei tzimtzum, achrei tzimtzum, and then comes to apply it. It looks like what he's going to say now is like this. V'adugma mekol zeh, and the example of all this, which means the example of this whole development all these development stages, yuvan b'neshama ha'lekis. From all of this example, we will understand in the divine soul. Essentially, it doesn't say nefesh elikis; it's neshama elikis, the divine neshama. Sheyesh bo hagimel madregas, that in the neshama of the divine neshama, it has in it 3 levels: the mutveh, murgish, or muskel, the natural or biological murgish, felt midas, and muskel, the cognitive. And what is this? Looks like here he's going to really spell out what we've been discussing about the nefesh elikis. For who hagdolas hameichin v'hamidas the nefesh elikis. This is the growth of the intellect and the emotions, the feelings and emotions of the divine soul by gimel zmanim. 3 periods, 3 stages. The ibur, yenike, and moichin. So Mutveh, Murgish, and Muskel are the similar, but Mutveh, Murgish, and Muskel really identify what is happening. And here he's saying Ibur, Yunik, and Moichin is telling us when it's happening. This distinction was not clear before. So Ibur, Yunik, and Moichin is actually when? Yemei Ibur, during pregnancy and at birth. Yemei Yunika, the nursing period and post-nursing. And Moichin is by Yud Gimel Shana to 20 years, 13 to 20, where the mind is developing and beginning to and is maturing to its fullest. So in these 3 times, you have the Mutveh is during Yenika, Mutveh is Ibur, Murgish is during Yenika, and that itself we said 2 stages, and Muskel is Moichin. It's almost the same words. So you got to explain. So this is becoming, this is definitely clarifying this point. The point of what's begashmis and what's beruchnis. The kamoi begashmis yesh teva hamidus ba'adam. Just as in a physical child, a physical human being, has just like, but I should retranslate. Just as it is in the physical dimension, that there's the natural emotions of a human being. Kamoi Kain, they write Kamoi Kain. So too, b'neshama lekis, same thing with the divine soul, the sharsha mebchina zod atzilus, that's rooted in the level of zod atzilus. Remember, Adam eitz asoda, b'chinas zaruah latzadik. Interesting. Now he's saying zaruah latzadik. Before he referred zah a few times to Adam eitz asoda, but it has a similar meaning because zaruah, zaruah latzadik. Divine light is sowed, planted for the tzaddik. In other words, the tzaddik. So he's referring to Zeruah. Zeruah is something that grows. So the neshama is rooted in Atzilus, in Zav Atzilus. I just want to see where he mentioned Adam Eitz Asada before, a few times. Maybe because there it's not tzaddik. Adam Eitz Asada really is also the natural human being. But he compared it to Zod Atzilus for sure. He said it clearly that it's Zod Atzilus. On top of page 1220, it was very clear. But I think also later, one more time he mentioned it. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay. So Kamoi came b'neshama lekiz the sharsha, which is rooted in Zav Atzilus. B'chinas zaruah latzadik. That light that is implanted or in the tzaddik, behechrich. So you just like it is a gashmis in the natural emotional development of the emotions of a human being. Same thing in the neshama lekis. Behechlich sheyesh b'kol echad k'moi teva mamish. You have to say that in each person there is mamish like his nature, just as it is natural emotions in the human being. The same thing with the nefesh lekis or neshama lekis. It has mamish in nature. Lira ulefached medovera hamazik lenafshe, to fear and to be frightened from something that's bad, that is destructive to his nefesh, to him, to his spirit. And to love the good, healthy things that that sustain and bring vitality and energize to his nefesh. So we're talking now about the nefesh alikis. Just as it is a human being has, for example, even a child is, fear is something that's destructive and will be drawn to something that's constructive and healthy. So too, the nefesh alikis says, also, you have to say, has in its embedded nature these emotions. And this is the level of awe or respect or fear and love, divine love and fear. To avoid the destructive or the bad, that comes from yira, from fear or from awe, respect. Due to the divine fear and I said before, fright. I don't like the word fright here. It doesn't really fit so well. But basically, fearing God, Yirah Shamayim, fear, awe, respect. But he also uses pachad, like pachad elikim, certain type of trembling before God, but a healthy trembling. We're not talking about unhealthy neurosis. We're talking about a healthy form of fear. Uliyas asay tev, and to do good, mitzad ha'ava shebenafshe, due to the ava shebenefesh. So to put it simply, in Tanya he says, there's two nefashos. There's an animal soul and there's a divine soul. And then he goes on and says, in each one, there's 10 faculties. The animal soul has 10 faculties from Chachma through Malchus, and the divine soul has 10 faculties. So they both have Chesed and Gvura. So there's the natural biological love and fear or attraction and repulsion that everybody has. There's the divine aspect of it, that the divine soul also has embedded in it a wiring of natural emotions like he just described. However, this is focused and directed toward godliness, the love for God, or the love what God wants you to do, say tev, or to avoid what God doesn't want you to do, because it's destructive for the soul. So just as it is in the human being, begashmis, meaning on the natural level, so too it is in the spiritual or divine soul level. Why he doesn't use nefesh abamis and quotes Tanya, it's not really a question, because maybe he doesn't want to go into nefesh abamis here, animal soul, but regardless, it is essentially that theme. So behechrich, he says that everyone, that b'chol echad k'may teva mamish, like literally a natural teva with it, which we know that neshamas that come from chesed, and neshamas that come from gvura, as we've discussed as well. Like the 7 branches of the menorah correspond to different types of souls. We see this all the time. We say Shammai, neshama connected to gvura, Hillel, chesed, Aaron, Moshe, Avram, chesed, Yitzchak, gvura, Pachad, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Tiferes. So you see this also on the nefesh elokis level. And he repeats now again, teva mamish b'nefesh elokis. And this is like actual nature, teva mamish, in the divine soul. It's not just an expression; it's the very wiring. He's saying basically mutveh in the nefesh elokis. That's just like we spoke mutveh in the general emotional character of the person. This is net teva in the nefesh elokis itself. But now he's again paralleling it. Rak, but only sheyesh rak. The only thing is sheyesh l'chol echad eifin miyuchad keteva hamidas begashmi. And just like we said before, he's going to go over it. Just like in Gashmis, everybody has chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yesed, malchus, but each one has a different composition, meaning a different mix of how their chesed works. This says the same thing here. Rak sheyesh l'chol echad eifin miyuchad. Each one has their oifim miyuchad of how their ava and yira, their chesed and gvura works. Keteva hamidis begashmis, leiv rach, a kosha, going back, a soft heart or a hard or a tough heart. So just as it is in gashmis, rachmoni v'achzori, compassionate or insensitive, shiflas v'isnasus, lowliness and exaltedness, kamoikenu beruchnius, so too in ruchnius, meaning in other words, in the divine side, the ruchnius here, in other words, not just the physical nature and the physical wiring of a human motions, but also ruchnius, the teichon, libos Hashem. Oh, yeah, it's an expression. I think it's a pasuk.
A pasuk.
Yeah, but within them is libos Hashem, the hearts of God.
No, toichen is not within. Toichen libos Hashem. Hashem is containing the hearts.
That's what teichen is not within. It means
toichen is counted, but here is toichen with a tzeva.
I said like from the word is Canaan, like Canaan.
Like tochnis is
like a plan. The teichen
is making the plan.
Okay, the hearts. Yeah, God makes these hearts. Ein lev echad deimel lechavere. One heart is not similar to another. In the divine light, in the emotions of his neshama. So just as we said it in the physical sense, so too in the spiritual sense. Oh, now he mentions exactly what I just said. Ukiyadua being yeshivas kane hameneda, as it's known about the 7 branches of the candelabra, of the menorah. Shein sheva mides, that these 7 branches correspond, these are the 7 mides, the 7 emotions, from chesed through malchus, moked neshamas Yisrael, which are the source for the souls of Israel. This is spoken about in L'Kutei Torah Ba'aleischa. Sheyesh Eved Ba'ava, there's a person who serves with love. Yesh Eved B'yira, there's one who serves with fear or respect and awe. This doesn't mean there is an overlap, but there is the primary focus, like I said, of Ram and Yitzchak. In each one, everyone has all the 7 emotions. But in one, the midah of love is revealed. And the midah, the emotion of yira, respect or fear or awe, is encompassed in it in a concealed way. In other words, the dominant gene, the dominant feature is ava. U'kamay ba'Avram, like we see by Avram, like it was by Avram. Shoy b'bchinas ava. Avram was in a state of ava, of love. U'kamay shekosav Avram oyavi. Avram, my beloved, or the one that loves me. Ksiv bey. So nevertheless, it says by Avram Oyavi, but then it says, I know now that is Yoreh Elikim, that he has. So Ava was his primary, but now I know that he also has Yira in him. Well, actually, I shouldn't say it that way. Then we also say by him, it says, now I know he has Yira, which means Avram was primarily Ava, but he also had Yira. The same with Yitzchak. Shoy bizgalos b'bchinas Yira. But revealed was primarily his Yiras Hashem, his awe of God and fear of God, va'ava klula behelim, and his love was encompassed more in a more concealed state, like it says elsewhere. The teva hamidas. And the teva midas and the nature of these emotions, the way they were born from a from the root of the place where they were. Chetzev is like when you like chip off from a mountain. So from the source of where they originate from, bli yeshuna, never changes. Gam kishiyaskin. Even when he gets older, the Yesav Das, the Chochma Belakus, and his awareness and Das, and understanding and wisdom, divine Das and Chochma, his divine understanding and wisdom, Hakol Yeh al Derech Teva Hamidus. Shebenishmase. It will always be inclined and going in the direction of the Midas, that which is his natural wiring. If from the level of chsadim chesed, or from the different chsadim, the different levels of kindness, or from gvuras, from the more what's called the level of gvura, the more level of severities, or restraints, or what is disciplines, or gvura, as we said, yira. Okay. So you could see he's literally paralleling whatever we learned in the previous paragraph about these three stages in the Midas Ha'adam in general, in human development. He's now spelling it out in the divine soul as well. So he's not going to go and talk more about the Mutveh mortgage. But if anybody has any questions, let me stop right now for a moment and take them and then continue. Okay.
This is really fascinating because normally we know it by human being. Here is saying that in a Neshama, now we understand that in Tanya, mitzateva nafshei lemailo, the Shammai, the Silal, and you cannot change it.
Well, we'll find out, because before he did say, okay, right now he says clearly you can't change it all the way through a person's life. It will always be guided by that. Yeah. That's what he said. Bili Yeshuna. Okay. Continuing on. Ubchinas mutvahu. And now he's explained this level of mutva, bchinas mutvahu, the level of mutva, which means naturally ingrained. Who shamidas hein betachlis hahelam ve'enim nekarim ve'niglim klal. Remember, we said the stage of ibur, the first stage, the midas, they're there, but they're not in any way obvious. So he says, in this level of mutva, the midas are all utterly concealed, in a state of concealment, and they're not discernible and revealed at all. So what is revealed? Because remember, we're talking now in Avodah. He says, Rak ha-maisa b'peil mamish. The only thing you see is maisa b'peil mamish. Remember, he said that you see the child. Even in pregnancy, you can see a child. There's a child. But you don't see its internal faculties at work. We're talking here the emotional faculties, but all of it. You see the child biological behavior. What does it mean here? Ma'aseh b'peil mamish. Remember nihi, without an emotional vitality. We're going to go back to it, page 1221, 1222, when he brought from the level of nihi. Ma'aseh b'peil b'li chayes erva chayes. Then the second level from Perek Tazayin, chapter 16 in Tanya. But I'm not going to go there right now. Let's just read what he says here. Ma'aseh b'peil. B'peil mashu sur mera v'asei tev b'peil. So he's not talking right now about a newborn child. He's talking an aveda of the nefesh halikis. This stage of mutveh is where a person has reached ma'aseh b'peil alone. He's doing sur mera. He avoids the negative. V'asei tev b'peil u'b'teikev gadol shelo yosher afilu ziv kolshu. Kol ziz kolshu. Sorry. So in action, and his behavioral is doing what's right, the poil, not just actually, but takef, gadol, with great intensity. And he does not waver, even one millimeter. Ziz means any movement. He's completely following exactly what he's supposed to be doing. So we're not talking about someone who in any way, God forbid, is wavering or wandering or somewhat compromising. In Ma'aseh b'peil mamish, he's doing what has to be done with intensity, without any wavering. That's mutveh. But now he says, "Ubavada yesh b'zeh ma'amidas da'ava v'yira." Certainly, it has within it the emotions of love and awe. But they're very concealed and not felt at all. Now, what does that mean exactly? So see now, not to confuse matters, first it seemed like he was speaking about just 1 second, I want to just because here it sounds very strongly that he's speaking about avodah. In other words, this can be an adult. It can be a full-blown adult that has a nefesh halikis. The nefesh halikis is still in a state of mutveh. He's just doing things mechanically, but perfectly according to the letter of the law. That's what it sounds like. Because it doesn't sound like he's talking about a newborn. But at the same time, when I look before in the parentheses, a nefesh halikis b'bchinas hakatnus, that could have also meant an avodah b'katnus, but on the top of the page, when he spoke about nefesh halikis, he clearly said the age till 13 years old, it's ibur, and the midas are through meichen. So I'm not sure. I don't want to come to anything conclusive, but let's continue reading, and I'm sure it'll become clear. So right now he's talking about a level of mutveh. Behaviorally, it's perfect, but there's no revealed emotions. He says certainly there are emotions, but they're completely concealed and not obvious. So before I explain that, whether he means that even a child, when he's doing something, there's midas somewhere concealed, or does he mean an adult who's doing it, but because there's a natural love to God that's just not obvious and not really driving anything, it's there concealed. I don't want to say, because I'm not sure what he means here, that the midas are behelim. Are they driving it and they're just concealed, or they're so concealed they're not even a factor? So all this remains to me a question, and I don't want to speculate because there's not enough information here. So what I'd like to do is continue reading, and then we'll see what he really means here. So I'm just telling you that in case you have these questions, let's hold them till we see what he's going to say. So then he says, so there's midas. Now he says, now there's a level, v'yesh shubis galus yeser. There's a state where the midas, the emotions are more revealed. Till now, he said they're completely concealed and not recognizable and not felt at all. There's a level, this Galus says, who shemefached midovara asur, and that's when a person is afraid of doing something prohibited, like you're afraid of doing an aveda, pachat. I should have continued. Shemefached midovara asur umenaged lakus, that he's afraid of doing something prohibited or forbidden, and that defies godliness. The yasa kama zehiras b'gdarim v'siyogim shalayovi chazasham l'davar isur, and he actually implements different protections and different care and siyogim, like gates, and gdarim. Gdarim is like a fence, and siyogim are like additional precautions that he shouldn't come to Dvar Isur. When we have all the dinim of the Rabbanim, they do asu siyog. You don't wait, God forbid, to do an Isur. You create all kinds of protections and precautions. You shouldn't come there in the first place. Like many laws of, let's say, around Hilchas Yichud. It was made in order not to come to a place where you should even have an Asayim. In other words, being alone with another gender, etc. Or other halachas that are made to protect when there's special exams, when there was a, just like when you attack a city, what you do is you build a wall around the city. So the same thing here is Motzabika Godele Geder. That when you see there's an open place where people can come and attack, you put up a fence. This is what the Rabbanan do, Siyogim. So in other words, the pachad is driving him to do that. So there is an emotion here. He's afraid. He's afraid of a certain, not to be nichshal, not to do something that defies God, that's forbidden or prohibited. So because of the pachad, creates all these precautions. And the same thing in the positive. V'yikiyum hamitzvos yakar etzlei. So it's not just pure behavioral. We have now a situation where a person actually has feelings. The performance of mitzvahs is precious. Yakar etzlei, it's precious. It's dear to him. Me'oid. It's very precious to him and dear. V'yidef achazeh. And he'll pursue it. V'gam tashmishe mitzvah. And not just the mitzvah itself, but also tashmishe mitzvah, which means supporting materials for the mitzvah. There's a mitzvah itself, and sometimes you need things to help you do the mitzvah. V'tashmishe kedusha. Yakar etzlei me'ed. So not just the mitzvahs, but also the supporting material for a mitzvah. Like tashmishe mitzvah, for example, goes at the izmal, when the knife you use for a bris, it's tashmishe mitzvah. Tashmishe kedusha would be like the beged of tzitzis. So there's different halachas about it. So there's different things that are supporting a mitzvah. And that is also precious to him. Why is the Rebbe Rashab going further? Because you see here, it's not just purely behavioral and do the minimum. Because there's an emotion, whether it's an emotion of being afraid of doing something inappropriate, or because it's precious to you, so you go further because the emotions involved, you go further into your commitment, and it's precious. Both precious and the fear. So there is some emotion here. This is all still, he's talking in Mutveh, it seems like he's talking that there's an emotional element as well. And all this, nevertheless, even though there's an emotion that can be involved, but it's not coming through the work of stimulating your emotions as in loving God or awe of God. It's all more because this is like mechanically part of his nature. So yes, you could also have teva benafshe ava v'yira, but it's still purely biological in a way. It's like people who are having their nature, they're just afraid of defying God, and they find a mitzvah precious, so they therefore abide. Like the Rebbe once said about, it says in Yerushalmi, about a person who comes to a minyan and they're davening, and it comes to Moedim, menafshe kara. When they said Moedim, he automatically inclined, automatically bowed his head. So most people would say that's a great thing. He's so ingrained in him that he just automatically menafshe, doesn't even have to think about it. Many times we see this all the time. People do something many times, it becomes part of your nature. But on the other hand, it's not an avodah. It's coming automatically. So it's somewhat like this. You can have automatic reflexive emotions like pachad and yira and ava, but it's still reflexive. It's not due to a deliberate effort of developing and growing your emotions. That's what he's saying here. So in avodah, You have Mutveh, it's completely behavioral, and there's no emotions at all involved. Or yesh, you also have, but it's still not what he calls his seirus, aveda, the words he used there. This means, sha'ava v'yira hamudvas, b'nefesh alikis, memekir chetzva, etzlei b'izgalus. In other words, the aviyira that is ingrained naturally in the divine soul, we said, remember, it's natural, it's wired. It's in a state of revealed, it's revealed. Rak shehein bekatnus ma'ed, but it's still in the very diminished, or I don't say it's not childish, but diminished state. It's not a developed, mature emotion. Bekatnus ma'ed she'ein b'chinas ava v'yira mamish. It's not what we can call love and awe, mamish love and awe. It's an emotion only connected to behavior, to the actions. Okay, I'm going to stop here. So this is Mutveh in Nefesh Alikis. The thing is, if I recall correctly, in the natural, in the Gashmias, as soon as it's revealed, I think he called that already Murgish. He didn't call it Mutveh. In Murgish itself, there were two levels. But I think the first level was, he said clearly, one second. Okay, this needs a little clarity. It could be he's talking about the higher level of Murgish that comes with Seichel, but it sounds to me that he's calling all this Mutveh. I'm going to have to look a little deeper into it. But I'm going to stop here, and I'll stop to take any questions. So I'm stopping here, close to the bottom of page 1225. Anyone?
Baal Shem Tov was Mekarev Anoshim Pshutim. Lefi zeh, they don't deserve anything. This is how they are b'moker chutzah. No avoid or nothing.
What? First of all, what does that have to do with this? He says Anoshim Pshutim here.
No, he's talking here about Anoshim that they have. Their nature is they are so careful with everything. They have such a connection.
I don't know if that's the Anoshim Pshutim of the Baal Shem Tov, to be honest.
No,
I don't know. It may not be at all. Anyway, we've not finished the topic. He's going to talk about next section about Tomim Belev, Tmimus Shebelev. The Mutveh Tmimus Shebelev. I'd rather address that after we finish the topic. I don't know, first of all, Baal Shem Tov is talking about that or whatever the meaning is. No one's taking away from someone's behavioral. It could be very beautiful that a person is completely dedicated and never wavers. That doesn't mean it's the ultimate. Remember, with Anoshim Pshutim, they didn't have the opportunity. It's not just they didn't have a chance to learn yet. But I don't want to go there. It's a little sidetrack right now. I think this is talking about the early stages of Aveda B'chlal. I want to see where he goes with this. We'll see where it goes. We're still in the middle. Any other questions? Okay. So we'll start.